of methods could really change the lives of these children. So I like to say it's kind of in my blood, but I thought I would initially take a different career path. I went to Brown University as an undergraduate, and then of all things, I did 2 years of finance. I did wealth management and I did investment banking. And I really quickly learned and realized that that was not for me, was not my passion or my calling. So I sort of pivoted back to what I recalled and how passionate I was about helping children. I ended up getting my master's degree in special education, my doctorate degree in general education, and then just slowly, organically started to grow EBL coaching to what it is today, starting with tutoring kids myself all around Manhattan to now having a large team of tutors who specialize in providing one-on-one tutoring, not just in the New York City and New Jersey area, but we work with kids virtually worldwide now.
I think sometimes I don't have any children, but some of the parents I speak to, I think sometimes we forget how important the tutoring process is, or just being that involved. Do you see sometimes that maybe there's like a disconnect between how involved the parents are and how involved maybe they should be when it comes to their children?
Well, I think there's a wide spectrum that we see in that respect. Some parents are very involved. They want to know exactly what's covered during every tutoring session, exactly what they can do to reinforce. And then we have parents that are completely uninvolved and sort of everything in between. So I think there's really a happy medium there. I think it's important for parents to be aware of what their tutor is working on and how their child is progressing, maybe what they can do at home to reinforce the skills that are being covered, but not overly involved to the point that it becomes like helicopter parenting and they need to know every detail of every minute.
I didn't think I would ever live long enough to hear all these different types of terms like helicopter parents and gentle parenting and uninvolved parenting and solo parenting. Growing up in the late 80s and early 90s, it was essentially one way to parent, right? It's my way or the highway.
Yes. Yep.
Essentially.
Yep.
We look like we're about the same age. Was that the experience for you as well?
That was the experience for sure. I think kids growing up now are growing up in a much different environment than the way you and I grew up. And oh, I never heard all of these different parenting terms. And quite frankly, there's so many even now that I don't know what they even mean.
There's one thing I always want to ask those who are involved in the tutoring of children, who work with children, special needs and otherwise, because I have two friends that they have children on the spectrum, Asperger's, I believe it's called,
Yes.
right? And one thing I haven't been able to get the courage to ask them yet, but maybe I can ask you this because I kind of hinted towards it with them. And I heard this from someone else who works with children. I always ask the question, when it comes to raising children, what are maybe some of the impacts that it has to the romantic relationship or the intimate relationship between those who have created a child, let's say in a heterosexual environment, let's say a mother and a father? Like, what are the impacts that you're seeing, if any, on the two parents involved?
You mean the parents between each other when they have a child with special needs? Is that what you mean? I think it really varies. Again, like I was saying before, wide spectrum. I think sometimes there are parents that really work well as a team and they're on the same page and trying to find the best support, the best services for their kid, and it works really well. I have found that in cases where there's a divorce where the parents don't get along, it can be really challenging. I often find that one parent will be very much on board and getting the right support and wanting to get started right away. And the other parent may not believe that there's a challenge or may not agree with the diagnosis. And that becomes a real battle of trying to get the right support for each child. So I do really think that for the sake of the child, even if parents have their differences with each other, the more they can unite as a team in helping their child, the better, of course, the child's going to be down the road.
What do you think are maybe some obstacles that may come up in those types of situations?
Well, I think there's a lot of things, but sometimes there's some denial. If a child is diagnosed with autism or dyslexia or whatever it may be, one parent may disagree with that diagnosis, may not believe it, and therefore may not feel their child needs the support. Maybe a parent expresses that they had those same challenges when they were younger and they never received a diagnosis or support and they turned out okay. I hear that fairly often. So they will question what if a child should have the diagnosis. Again, though, at the end of the day, there are so many more resources now and so much more support available that if you can identify the right resources for your child, especially if they have a special education need, it's really like giving them a gift. It's giving them the tools that can help them succeed in school and ultimately in life.
So take us through some of the tools that can help the parents when raising children that have special needs. Because from the outside looking in, we can observe that they need different form maybe or different type of attention versus children who don't. And I know there isn't a manual. You can just go to the library and say, hey, I want to be parent of the year, and you just read and read and read. So take us through some of the tools that can benefit these parents.
Sure. Well, I always believe that a parent is always their child's best advocate and they know their child the best. So if they feel like something isn't right, their child is struggling with their homework, struggling to learn how to read, whatever it may be, the first step is they really should have a dialogue with their child's teacher. See if the teacher's noticing these kinds of challenges. If so, it may make sense to delve into having an evaluation done. And in doing so, not only can a diagnosis be made, but the right support and services can be implemented through an IEP or through a 504 plan, where the school then needs to provide these services to their child. I also like to say that whenever possible, I think it's so easy for parents to get frustrated with their child when they don't do well in school or they're not reading as much as they should or whatever it is. But the more parents can give a positive spin, positive feedback, make their child feel good about things that they do well, the more motivated they'll be and the more likely their child is to ultimately do well in school.
There was one person I spoke with who works with the parents of children, not necessarily the children, but the parents of children. And one thing she mentioned to me is that she was actually surprised how many parents were becoming the type of parents they didn't like when they were children. Do you sometimes see the parents becoming what they didn't like and maybe pushing that on or projecting that onto their children?
I think sometimes, and again, in this world, there's so many different ways to parent and so many different types of parenting that's out there. But yeah, I think sometimes parents can be very hard on their kids to a point that it really weakens their self-esteem and makes them feel poorly about themselves or turns them off from school. So again, I think when that negativity comes into play, that can really harm a child in so many ways.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest fears. Like me growing up without my mother or my father, there was a time in my life where I sat back and I thought, I don't have any training for this. It's like getting married or dating, right? Like you're just hopes and dreams, baby. Like if right?
Yeah.
If it works, it works. And then I sat back and I'm like, what if I became the type of parent I didn't like growing up? And it's not like you can undo it. When the child is here, the child is
Mhm.
here, right? And unfortunately, you hear some stories where some people realize that they can't be the type of parents maybe they thought they could, and then they abandon their child. Right here in Canada, like we have children being dropped off at fire stations, police stations, because they just don't think that they can do what they could do. Um, if you're speaking to the parents who are struggling with the expectations of parenthood, how would you coach them to understand that maybe those thoughts are okay as long as you're working towards a successful goal?
Sure. What I would say is there's no manual for how to parent perfectly. No one really has the solutions for how to handle every problem and every challenge that will come about when raising a child. And what I always like to say is as a parent, we make the best decision we can with the information we have at that moment. And it may be that down the road you look back and say maybe that wasn't the best decision, but in that moment you did the best you could. You made the best decision that you thought was right for your child, and we all make mistakes. No one is perfect. That's part of the process of growing, being a parent, and raising kids. And it's okay. Failure is okay. That's how we grow and that's how we ultimately become better. But I think it's always a good idea to reflect back and then. Is in general in life, reflect back on what went wrong and what you can do better going forward.
You maybe find confidence is an issue when it comes to that because a lot of people are afraid of failing. And to fail as a parent, you're impacting someone else. Like if I fail at losing weight, I'm impacting me. If I fail at fixing my keyboard, I'm impacting me. But if I fail as a parent, I'm impacting myself. I'm impacting my family. So do you see maybe there's a struggle there where the expectation weighs on them because they're not only responsible for themselves, but they're responsible for another living person?
Well, I like to stay away from the word failure when it comes to parenting. I don't think anyone's a complete failure. It sounds like a very catastrophic way of thinking when it comes to parenting. I think it's more maybe we make some poor decisions along the way, or some decisions that may be better than others. And if there's one decision that we make, or a few decisions that maybe were in retrospect were not the right ones, that's okay. We're going to do things differently going forward. And parenting, raising a child is a journey, it's a process. There's no exact right or wrong way to raise a child.
When you're speaking to the parents and you tell them that, do they say, aha, that makes sense? And then they understand that it's not that they're failing, they're just maybe taking a step back and then they have to replan and reorganize. Or do you need to maybe coach them in a different way? Because as you mentioned, right, it varies. And not only do the parents have to adjust, but maybe what they're looking at as an overall picture has to adjust as well.
Sure. I mean, we really coach the kids more than the parents. Parents are sort of a side note. I would say our focus is really helping the kids. But yes, I think a lot of parents are open and receptive to hearing those kinds of tips and advice on and kind of reassurance that it's okay if you made a poor decision or what you did. Sometimes parents will blame themselves for not getting support for their child earlier. And again, it's a matter of you thought you made the right decision in the moment, and maybe down the road you realize it wasn't, but that's okay. It was just one decision. There's going to be many more decisions you'll have to make down the road. Let's reflect, let's learn from it, and let's try to make better choices going forward.
When you mention the children, what kind of demographic are you looking at when you're working with the children? Like, what's the age group and maybe what's some of the needs that they would necessarily require from you?
Sure. We work with kids of all ages, as young as preschool, and we actually go all the way up through the adult level. So it's really a wide spectrum of kids from all different socioeconomic backgrounds. And our specialty is really helping students build their academic skills, reading, spelling, writing, math. We do a lot of work with study skills, executive functioning skills, organizational skills. That's really our specialty in all different age levels.
Where were you when I was 8 years old and I needed all of that? Right?
You
Like
and many other kids.
I know, right? I look back and I wanted to do so well in school just because I had a different type of motivation. Like I looked to my left and I looked to my right and I was like, I got to get out of this environment. And at that time, education was the way out. And probably you've seen this with a lot of kids where the stronger the foundation that they could build from themselves, the more that they could prepare themselves to maybe lead the type of life that they wanted, or maybe lead a life that is within their grasp, but they're not currently living it. When you get the children and you're dealing with some of the expectations that maybe they see around them, because you mentioned you're dealing with all ages, does that maybe impact how dedicated that they may be, knowing that society is putting certain expectations or in some cases certain limitations on them?
I think it really varies based on the child and based on the family environment. I think some kids are intrinsically motivated. They want to do well in school for the sake of doing well and it makes them feel good. And other kids are not as motivated by school and they question why they have to learn certain things, why they have to be in school. So that's a different kind of empowerment that we have to do, explaining to them why we need to learn these skills and how they can help them. So I think it really varies based on each child.
And when you're dealing with the children that want to do really well, how do you continue to keep them motivated to succeed at the level that they're succeeding at?
Well, I think a lot of those kids have a natural drive to continue to learn and thrive and move from doing well in elementary school to doing well in middle school to then going to a good college. So I think there's sort of this subset of kids that have this natural motivation and they're able to kind of push through challenges. But I would say, more kids really hit a lot of speed bumps along the way, and we have to help motivate them and encourage them to get through those speed bumps and continue to want to do well in school.
How difficult is that? Because you're not necessarily the parent, but you're coming in with all good intentions.
Yeah, I mean, it can be challenging, but I think developing the relationship with the child, building trust, becoming close with them to a point where they're receptive to our thoughts and our suggestions is a key part of it. So it's really about building that relationship aside from just teaching the skills.
And then you take them all the way through the education process, like the different levels up into college, university, or do you see them the full length of the way?
Well, it depends on the child. So we work with kids of all ages. I would say it's rare that we would take someone from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. Usually, our goal really is to teach them the tools so that they can ultimately take off with the skills and not need a tutor forever. But we do work with kids that are, again, as young as age 3 in preschool and through college and beyond.
So take us through maybe some of the educational programs that you're offering them, and so we can understand what is being taught to them, because I think a lot of people on the average learner, and when they think of school, they think of what? They think of science, math, and English. So take us through some of the programs that you offer them and how you're raising the bar when it comes to these children.
Sure. Well, all of the work that we do is one-on-one, and it's all skills-based, core skills, reading, spelling, writing, math, study skills, like I was saying. And everything that we do is we use research-based multisensory methods that are catered to the individual needs of each student. So we start with an initial evaluation to gauge what their academic needs are. If they have any evaluations or IEPs that have been done, we find it helpful to read those as well. And then we really put together the right combination of research-based techniques that are very much customized to the skills they need help with and the levels that they're at from the get-go.
And then once they're successful in the program, they would move on, graduate in a sense, and then they will continue forward. Is that correct?
Well, it depends on the child. So for some kids, so if a child, for instance, is, let's say, a younger child who's struggling with phonics, with decoding words, it might be that once they learn tools and strategies for how to effectively and accurately decode words, they're then ready to take off on their own. Other kids, however, when they're young, might struggle with decoding, and then they learn the tools and strategies to develop that skill efficiently. But then they get to a point where there's a lot of writing involved in school, and they really now struggle with writing. Or maybe they struggle with high level reading comprehension skills, and they then need support in those skills. So some kids do need continued support as the demands of school continue to increase, and then others are ready to jump off on their own.
And is this something that is maybe aligned with the school in their area, or is this more so a separate way to help them through that system?
That also depends. There are some kids that have such severe academic weaknesses that they need strict remediation that does not involve their schoolwork, but involves solely building their skills. And then other kids need more integration of their schoolwork, of the curriculum. We might, for instance, do a combination of building their skills and then showing them how to apply those skills to their relevant schoolwork. So, again, all catered to the individual needs of each student.
Okay, I think I'm beginning to understand it. So that totally makes sense, because now we're in a situation where there's some children who are struggling for whatever the reason. But once it's identified, it's tailored specific to that child to help them overcome whatever obstacles that are identified through the initial assessment. Is that correct?
Correct. And again, they may not ever overcome their challenge, but it's a matter of teaching them strategies and tools to build those areas of weakness.
Build them to a way that they're functioning in the way that they would want to.
Yes, to their capacity.
Perfect, perfect. Okay. Because I asked the question that way because I can see this being something that will benefit all types of children, whether they have special needs or not. Would that be accurate to say?
Definitely. Definitely. I think kids with special needs often need more intensive support, but absolutely, there are many kids who are neurotypical who, of course, really benefit from tutoring.
Okay. So Emily, so let's say for example you had like three wishes, like you had the magic lamp. What where do you see this going and where do you want this to go?
When you say this, you mean like our tutoring program
Your
or
tutoring program,
education in
yeah.
general?
Well,
Well,
both. Actually, do both because education is very important, right? So let's do both.
sure. Well, I would say, of course, the more children we can help, the better. I think since we've developed our online tutoring program, our virtual program, and lots of technology and resources, we've been able to help so many more kids in so many more geographic areas where they may not have access to this kind of specialized tutoring that we provide. So I would love to grow that even more, to just spread our wings and help more and more kids in so many different geographic areas. And also we do work with many kids who receive funding from their Department of Education, and therefore they don't have to pay for the tutoring. So that's been a really great way to help kids who don't have the means to necessarily pay that. So continuing to grow that piece is certainly very rewarding. And then I think from an education standpoint, I think the more professional development we can integrate for teachers into our school system on these kinds of specialized techniques for helping kids who have learning challenges, I think the more we can prevent continued challenges with kids down the road.
And as we look to close, what advice do you want to give the parents, the children, and those who are looking to assist, maybe with both?
Well, I think something I always think about is when we look at a child who has a special need, who has dyslexia or autism or ADHD, it's easy to focus on their challenges at school, on the difficulties they have. But there are so many visionaries, leaders, successful CEOs of companies that have these kinds of challenges. And it's really getting through school that can be difficult for them, but they have the skills and the tool set to really excel in life. So I think always kind of keeping that in the back of our minds that these tend to be very smart kids that have great potential to be successful in life.